Welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast, where longtime strength and conditioning coach Tommy Moffitt explores everything from the art of coaching, improving performance, sports nutrition, and mental training. Now, welcome your host, Coach Tommy Moffitt.
Welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast, and I am your host, Tommy Moffitt. If you're listening for the first time, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. The purpose of the podcast is both educational and an opportunity for me to introduce and highlight some of the great coaches, administrators, and friends that I've come to know and respect during my coaching career. I think the listeners will enjoy the variety of the guests and topics that are discussed and hopefully come away with a few knowledge bombs that propel your teams to greatness. Our special guest today is an old friend of mine, and his name is Coach Lance Sewell. And Lance is from Texas State University in San Marcos, Texas. Coach Sewell is in his fifth year at Texas State and serves as the coordinator of strength and conditioning for the Olympic sports. Coach works directly with baseball, women's basketball, and soccer programs. Prior to his time in San Marcos, Coach had worked at West Virginia, the University of Tennessee, the University of Texas, and the University of Miami football and baseball teams. During his 12 seasons at Texas, he was a staff member for the 2005 National Baseball Champions and also the 2005 National Football Championship team. Before returning to collegiate athletics, Coach Sewell was the director of conditioning for the Cincinnati Reds Major League Baseball team, and from 97 to 2001, and after spending a season in the minor leagues from 97 to 98. Coach Sewell was a graduate assistant strength coach at the University of Tennessee from 1995 and 96. Working with football and baseball, and primarily our man Peyton Manning. He earned his Master's of Science in Sports Administration from Tennessee, as well as a Bachelor's in Science in Health and Fitness from Baylor. Welcome to the podcast, Coach Sewell. How are the Bobcats doing today?
Oh, we're doing great. It's a Bobtastic day down here in San Marvelous.
I like that. Bobtastic day. Super cool.
Yes, sir. It's a great day to have a great day, as we always say.
Good deal. Well, let's get into the show, and let's not hesitate with these questions because I've got some good ones for you today. Okay.
No doubt.
All right, we're gonna start with the same question I ask everyone, and I think it's important. But everyone's journey and motivation is always different. What led you to your decision to become a strength and conditioning coach?
Oh, that's a great question. And one that it just pops in my mind eyes so easy that once I got into college, started one year playing junior college baseball, and you quickly realize, okay, you're not going to go to the next level. So you better take this academic stuff serious. And then I'm like, well, what do I want to do? Dad's an accountant. Dad's my hero. So I wanted to follow in his footsteps. You start taking your business classes and you're like, this doesn't jive. Next up, I loved sports growing up. Being a Texas kid, you played football when it was in season. You played basketball was in season, and when you baseball round and around, you played baseball. So then it's like, okay, well, I want to coach. And then it's like, well, what sport do I want to coach? I don't know. Do I want to be a football coach or do I want to be a baseball coach? Well, then it happened. I was in exercise physiology class there at Baylor, and our strength coach at the time, Rob Rogers, came and spoke to us, and he told what he did as a strength coach and how it was beneficial to football, basketball, baseball, track and field, tennis, all the sports that he worked in. And to me, literally, it was that light bulb moment. This is what I want to do. I get to work across the board with multiple athletes. I don't have to be just a football coach or a baseball coach. So long story short, I went up to Rob after class and I said, I want to do what you want to do. He was like, pump the brakes. Let's make sure. So he asked me to come by at the end of his work day and meet with him, which I did. and he kind of laid out some parameters. And he said, "How does that sound?" I said, "It's great." He said, "Okay, well, what it was is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I volunteered in the weight room after my class schedule was done, and it basically was just a lot of watching, a lot of dusting, and a lot of sweeping." And then at the end of that, and that was the spring semester of 92 or 93. And at the end of the spring semester, we sat down and he said, "Okay, well, what do you think?" I said, "This is it. I want." He said, "Okay, football starts their summer conditioning this date, this time. You're more than welcome to be here." And I've been doing it ever since then.
Wow. Well, let me ask you this. So while you were talking, I was trying to figure out how you ended up in Knoxville. I've been hitting the head a few times, and so what was your connection to Knoxville, and how did that take place?
Well, then it goes back to Rob. And I was getting ready to graduate. We sit down with him, and I'm like, "Okay, well, what's the next steps?" He said, "Well, generally, you want to get a graduate assistant position so you can learn, uh, I guess, for lack of better words, the X's and O's of putting programming together. We're taught the scientific aspect of it, um, but when it actually comes to implementing the program, you weren't ever taught that." So Rob was like, "You need to or I highly recommend you doing a graduate assistant position. And these are some coaches that I think are some of the best out there." Coach Stuckey uh, had made the transition from Arkansas to Tennessee at that time. And my dad and I went instead of the spring break my senior year. We went on and visited three schools over there in the SEC. We visited Alabama. Coach Carruthers was the head strength coach at the time. Talked with him. He's like, "Sorry, I don't have anything available." Georgia, went over there. Georgia didn't have anything, at that time. And then went up to Tennessee and spoke with him, with Coach Stuckey. And he again said, "I don't have anything available by that time." So from there, though, I was able to land a internship with the Chicago White Sox and Vern Gambetta, because Rob and Vern were good friends, and he got me a recommendation. Um, so I was able to get the position with the White Sox. Uh, you learn from Vern, and then he sends you, or the White Sox send you out. I was up in Bristol there. And then another student strength coach that we had at Baylor by the name of Joy Hayes. He was working across the street for the Lady Vols. And,
That's
she would
right.
come over there and pester you guys.
Yeah,
And then she
that's
said,
right.
"Hey, Coach Stuckey's got a spot open." So, I was able to call Coach Stuckey up, and Coach Stuckey said, "Well, when can you be here? We need somebody." So then I called Vern. I was like, "Here's the situation. I've got an opportunity to GA under Coach Stuckey." And Vern was like, "Do it. Coach Stuckey's one of the best. You can get down there with him. Go." So Vern let me finish up the season early. And then it was August of 95 that I jumped down there with you guys in Knoxville.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. What's Coach Hayes doing now? Is she still in strength and conditioning?
She's the last I saw, she's a teacher here in Central Texas. So she got out of the S&C field, and she's a teacher, I think, in her hometown area of San Saba.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So out of those guys, and I'm sure there's others, who has been the biggest influence on your career and development?
There's a lot of folks that come to mind. If it wasn't for Rob taking the time, to meet with me and being patient with
Yeah.
me, I wouldn't be where I am as I am today. If it wasn't for Coach Stuckey, and for you teaching the actual on the floor implementation of the Olympic lifts, I wouldn't be where I was today. And then if it wasn't for Vern just learning or teaching his system
Yeah.
and getting to the point where, I don't know if getting to the point, but really emphasizing you're coaching an individual. You're not coaching a sport. It
Right.
doesn't matter really what exercise in a sense is it. It does matter if it's beneficial to that athlete. It's not the old, well, everybody's going to power clean or everybody's going to power snatch.
Yeah.
No, it's more athlete specific because, some people can't catch and receive a clean. So that was his big, profound. So definitely, those four, you and Coach Stuckey up there at Tennessee, Rob over at Baylor, and then Vern is, why I am where I am today.
Yeah. I remember, because it was not the early years, but the formative years of strength and conditioning on the collegiate level, because, staffs were still really small, and there wasn't the internet had just started. So the thing that I remember was a lot of the stuff that you brought with you, and I'm sure a lot of it came from Vern and Rob, but a lot of the stuff that you did with our guys, rotator cuff, the monster bands, the different stuff, it was more the stuff that you did. There was a lot of prep work before the workout, and then individualization with a lot of the other stuff, the smaller muscle groups that you did that wasn't mainstream then. It was all new stuff, I guess, for the lack of a better phrase. And so I remember that being something that that I felt like you contributed to our program that we hadn't been doing. And I guess I'd only been there a year before you got there, but it was definitely some stuff that we were able to implement in the program that we hadn't done in the past, which was
Yeah,
good.
it was definitely it was stuff that you picked up from Vern with his work with the White Sox, but then it wasn't just his work with the White Sox, it was his career because he's worked in the track and field. He actually started out as a track and field coach. His work with Chicago Bulls and Al Vermeil
Yeah.
was instrumental in his foundation. So yeah, all those little stuff, and that's what was able to, like you said, give me a little niche that Coach Stuckey came to say to me and said, "Hey, when Peyton's in the weight room, you're right there with him."
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that we do everything possible from our standpoint to make sure he's available.
Yeah. And you're probably the reason why he was as great as he was as a pro. Have you ever told him that?
No, that's not true at all. He was great as a pro because, not only was he blessed to be born with the genetics, but I can remember sitting in a graduate class there at Tennessee, and everybody was talking about how great of an athlete was, and I didn't let it known that I worked with him, and I said, okay, hands down, he's a great athlete, but maybe there's something different, and that's his mindset.
Yeah.
And to this day, there's a couple of groups or athletes that is the standard for me, right? And it's like from an individual standpoint, Peyton's the standard. It's like, and people are, well, what do you mean? It's like, okay, when he was in the weight room, not only was he lifting intentionally, right? He was consistent and he put forth great effort. But then he was going to check you and make sure you were doing the same. Towards one of the stories I will use, say like, so Peyton would come in there and train with the receivers. So one time, he's training with Marcus Nash, and Marcus is getting a couple of sets and reps or even exercises ahead of him. And he's like, Marcus, you getting everything in? You doing all your sets? And Marcus is like, don't worry about me, Peyton. He goes, no, I'm worried about you
Yeah.
because I want to make sure you're doing what needs to be done. So you saw that as an early,
Yeah.
that he wasn't afraid to say, no, you're going to do what's required, and
Yeah.
we'll go from there, buddy.
Yeah. And he checked Marcus then, and I can remember Peyton being in Marcus's wedding. So, he was the type of guy that would check you, but the players respected him because of what, he stood for and everything that he accomplished. And so Marcus got married his senior year. And that summer, those two missed. I remember them missing a workout because Peyton had to go back. I think Marcus was either from Missouri or Oklahoma,
I
but
believe it was Oklahoma.
Peyton left to go home to be in Marcus's wedding, or he left and went to Oklahoma to be in Marcus's wedding. So he checked him, but they were tight, and that's the way he was. And he always had that Thursday night workout group after practice also, and he would have all the defensive guys, all the defensive linemen and the O linemen in the weight room after practice on Thursday night doing extra. And it was kind of like a barbershop setting, but he made sure that those guys came in there. And if they didn't, he would always bust their balls the next day because, that was their deal.
Exactly.
So leading into this next question, and I think it's, you've touched on some of this already, but what are your foundational principles that you've built your coaching philosophy on since this all began?
That makes you think, since you've been doing it a long time, what are the principles that you build in thing? And it starts with that key word that you just said, the foundational, because if you don't have a good foundation in anything, heck, in your buildings, you're going to be weak. And so it comes back to the foundation. And first for me is I'm working with an individual, and I want to remember that, versus it's not a one size fit all. Like, okay, well, we're back squatting today, but now you're coming in, and if I don't have it on the injury report, you're telling me you got something going on. So I want to dive in and do a little deeper dive to find out what's going on. So the first one is recognize that they are an individual, right? And then second, or second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever you go from there. I want to train primarily on our feet, because sport, uh, you know, other than swimming, right, or
Yeah.
equestrian, uh, is played on your feet. So I want to train from the ground up. The little catchphrase that I picked up over the years is we're going to train from the toenail to the fingernail, right? Because again, you look at, like, say, if you're thinking from the baseball standpoint, from the pitcher, right? When you're toeing the
Yeah.
rubber, okay, what did I just say? You're toeing the rubber to
Yeah.
release point through the fingertips. You go back to your basketball player, when you're on the free throw line, right? You're setting your feet and then releasing through your fingertips. Okay, well, if we're talking about, soccer where I'm working at, well, you don't really want to use your hands unless you're the goalkeeper.
Yeah.
But again, as you're running the force application from the ground contact through, when we're doing our speed development with soccer, we want on proper arm mechanics too, because there's a drill that you get on the ground and you can show them the importance that the upper body plays and helping produce force in the ground. So yeah, we want to train on our feet. We want to train from the toenails to the fingernails. The sexy catchphrase is we're training movements, not muscles. Yeah, but you're training muscles,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
you're getting strong. So what does that mean? We're training movements. Well, and then the other one is like, you want to train multiplanar, right? Because sport is multiplanar. So how does that look in the weight room? If we're doing some form of Olympic lift, it's, look at that plane. We're moving vertically, right? So then where can we come in from a single leg stuff and do lunges or step ups or rear foot elevated back squats to get in a different plane, and then kind of combine that with landmine for other rotational aspects, or med balls work to make it more planar. And then the other thing is, foundation is you want to make it from your conditioning standpoint, or even here in the strength and conditioning facility, energy specific, and that's why I'll get the questions a lot as, being primarily labeled throughout my career as a baseball strength coach. Well, why do you do Olympic lifts? Because that's not sport specific. And I'm like, okay, how is it not sport specific? It's sport specific from the energy system, right? To get the muscles and the central nervous system to recruit as fast as possible, right? And then, you'll hear from other baseball people where there's the injury potential aspect. There's the injury potential aspect in anything. And then you'll hear, well, it's the time consumption. I'm a teacher. A coach is a teacher. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And I love teaching those lifts.
Yeah.
Now, then you break it back to the individual standpoint. If they have an issue with the catch, okay, we'll high pull, right? Or maybe it's the catch on the clean, but they can catch a snatch. Okay, we will snatch. Again, it's not the exercise, it's the movement, right?
Right.
You know as well as I do, there's no bad exercises. It's the movement patterns, right? So that's when it's like, it's people say, well, you shouldn't do Olympic lifting with baseball. Why? If we want to develop the athlete to be the best baseball player, then that's going to be part of the training program.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen to that, because you don't perform athletics one muscle group or one limb at a time. The body works together as a unit to apply force. Yeah, well, that's awesome. So that segues right into this next question. Okay. So you've coached a long time and you've worked with a lot of different sports and you have a lot of experience with a lot of different programs. And you're currently training baseball, basketball, and soccer, 3 very different sports with vastly different energy systems and movement patterns. Can you compare them as far as the developmental aspects of the 3? And is there something that the 3 may have in common of those sports?
The development aspect, I think what the 3 have in common as from the incoming freshman standpoint is a lack of strength. Now, you'll see more strength from the incoming baseball player than what you will from a basketball player or a soccer player. But as well as I, the overall strength needs that they have isn't, so that's a common component. And that's so fun when you have, your women's basketball freshmen show up early during the summer, and then your baseball players show up early, and your incoming freshman soccer players, and you're like, yeah, this is the teaching moment. To where, it's how do you want to implement that? So that's the common thread. And then the other thing is you look at the common, they do have different energy systems, but they're also at some point very explosive. So I want to train explosive them at the same time too. How does that look, right? Well, if soccer is very tactical and technical, am I going to do as much Olympic lifting with them? No. So will I focus on more dumbbell snatches or barbell high pulls to get from that point? Yes. But I still want to train them explosively because they're going to need to be an explosive athlete at the same point, not only have a great work capacity.
Right.
And then what was the last part of the question was?
Well, the main thing is just how they differ. Just compare how they differ and then how they're similar.
Okay, yeah. So then the difference is, right? So as you know, soccer is such a tactical game that fitness is a huge component. I heard this from my men's tennis coach up there at Tennessee, but it reigns true for soccer. Legs feed the lungs. So
Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna do a little bit more running
Yeah.
during our heavy summer conditioning phases when we're getting ready to go into camp for them than we will for basketball and baseball. You know, if you kind of look on the a tier system with what the sports I'm working with, soccer is going to be more conditioned oriented versus strength training. And then basketball is going to be in the middle, where especially depends on the head coach's style. Well, with me, with Coach Z, she wants to play an up tempo style, so I got to get them up and I got to get them down the court. You know,
Right.
I got to have them to be fresh at the end of the game as they were. So they've got to have a great work capacity, but then I still want them to be strong, you know, so they can, you know, oh, I don't know where I've heard it. You might have said it, you know, speed kills, but strength punishes. So that's what you want, how you want your basketball program. And then if you're going off of that system there with baseball, so you want them to be explosive, dynamic, strong cats that the conditioning component follows down at the end of the spectrum. You know, the old joke when I was in pro ball with the Reds is they would say, well, you've never seen anybody on the injured list with pulled fat.
I heard that the other day too.
Right?
I heard that. So you know who? So Kurt Ainsworth, was a great uh, LSU baseball player, and he went to the MLB and was he made it to the majors and was a pitcher in the major, and he had injury problems, and he's a fanatic. So he's the CEO of Marucci Bat Company now, or
Right.
Marucci Sports, and so he was at me, Clay, and Aaron went to go watch LSU scrimmage McNeese. They played 22 innings. So Clay played JUCO baseball too, and he said, "Dad, this is like JUCO ball here. They played a 22 inning game on Sunday." But Kurt was there, and we were laughing because he said, he trained all the time, and all the veterans were like, "Dude, you work out too much," and they were like, "You can't pull fat," and they were like, "You're not fat enough. You need to run less, eat more, and drink more beer." Because you can't pull fat. Yeah, so that was funny. You're the second person that I've heard say that. That is
Right.
hilarious.
And you know, and coming from a strength coach, that's not something that you want to say, but
Yeah,
think about it. That's what makes the game of baseball so great. Round
yeah,
ball, round bat. The object is to hit it square,
yeah,
right? Right. So it's again, it's such a technical sport. Now, you know, we all know that you're going to be a better athlete if you are consistent with your strength training regimen for baseball. But then it just goes back to making sure you're training for sport,
yeah.
not training for the sport of bodybuilding or the sport of CrossFit, right? You're training for the sport of baseball.
Yeah. So before we kind of get into the different sports that you train in depth, I kind of want to know how, and I think this is important for young coaches, for high school coaches, for sport coaches. How do you go about organizing your calendar and your training days, uh, and the demands of working with three different teams? Because, you're not always going to have just one team that you get to focus on. And when you become directors and stuff like that, sometimes you got to balance a lot of different stuff. So how do you set that system up for the different sports there?
Well, the way what we've developed here are for me working with my three sport coaches is first, you know, an in season sport team will get the first priority of choosing their training time, right? And then you kind of bounce off of that. Then you look at the demands and how much time you actually spend from a strength training standpoint or a conditioning standpoint. I know it kind of works out very good, and it's just the way that the administrators have assigned the sports year, right? So when we'll start, so if you're looking at your start of the academic year in the fall, soccer's in camp. So my time with them is usually just twice a week post practice. And then you come back, okay, well, then let's look at our, emphasize, well, women's basketball will be moving into season. So then I'll go with, and they'll kind of get more first priority than baseball time choosing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she will usually go in the mornings. So I'll get women's basketball in the mornings, and then it works out with Coach Trout. He's like, okay, well, we'll go in the afternoons. Uh, but then the one thing that we save, and it's been no matter where it's, even there as a G at Tennessee, when you work with baseball, or Miami or Texas or West Virginia, Friday morning, 6 a.m. for baseball. We got to curtail some of that Thursday night activity.
Yeah.
And then by the time fall ball hits for baseball, end season starts for women's basketball. So they will, if we're starting 4 times a week with women's basketball, then she'll shift down to 3 times a week. And in season baseball, fall ball, I'll shift back from 4 times a week to 3 times a week for the everyday players. Now with the pitchers, it'll be based off of their throw-in schedule.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not, okay, you're going to be in here Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or you're going to be in here Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. It's based off of their throw-in schedule. That, again, I've had great relationships with every pitching coach, and that's no doubt the same way here with Chad. He's given me the list. He said, here's where we're pitching. So we'll base it off of their throwing plan. And then as we're moving along, right, when we shift over into the spring semester, so women's basketball is in the middle of their season. They've cut back to twice a week. It's post practice. Baseball, we're ramping back up. We're kind of doing like a mini off season cycle for 4 weeks before they start full practice. So we can still go back to those afternoons. And then soccer, with a new coaching staff, we just had a new coaching staff. And he came on board last spring too. So instead of with the old coaching staff, it was early mornings during the spring. He's like, I want them to get their sleep, and we're doing it in the afternoons also. And then again, since they're what's labeled as off season, they'll come in after baseball, and I'll train with them.
Yeah. Now, do you have help with these teams? Do you have interns that help you?
Yeah, I'll have interns if we have them available.
Yeah.
I don't advertise like you see a lot of. It's like, hey, come in, do an internship. I mean, there's other issues with that from a lack of pay or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't do that, but I've also developed a wonderful working relationship with Dr. McCurry here over in our exercise science department, and he teaches at the graduate level, and he gets us a handful that just make sure they want to be strength coaches,
Yeah.
and there's some of them they figure out real quick, whoa, this ain't for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
So we'll have interns to do it, but then from my own personal standpoint, I don't want a lot around for, thankfully you look at the roster size, I don't have a huge roster. Now baseball numbers are creeping up there, so you do need some extra set of eyes on that. But I guess I'm just selfish, and I want to keep the teams and work with them myself.
Yeah. Great job, man. That was good. And I think that's important for young coaches and high school administrators and coaches to understand that there's got to be give and take. And, you don't always get the greatest time or, the year round 7 a.m. or 4 p.m. schedule, that there's got to be some give and take there with the different teams.
Yeah. And that's just to reiterate, my 3 sport coaches at the present time are great at that. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was a hiccup with women's basketball scheduling, and I had to call my baseball coach up, and obviously he wasn't happy about it, but he said, hey, okay, no problem. I get it.
Yeah.
It happens. So they're awesome about it. And then yesterday I just had a conversation with my soccer coach as they're moving from end season and what we want to do these last 2 weeks. And I said, okay, well, here's where we're at with women's basketball, and here's where we're at with baseball. He said, hey, I understand that, and we'll work all together.
Good. All right. Now, I want to get kind of sports specific here and talk baseball first. You've coached in the MLB and you've been at some very successful collegiate programs. Texas and Miami are right up there, in the top 5 probably all time, along with LSU and a couple of other places. What are some things that you feel every baseball player can benefit from, regardless of his position or the level of play? What are some things that you think that every one of them should do, if there is one? I mean,
well, yeah, and it's just not for a baseball player; it's for any athlete, and you'll agree with this. They got to be consistent.
Ooh, yeah.
They have to be intentional about it, not habitual. Right? It's connecting the mind aspect of it to the movement of the muscles. So that's the one thing that when we talked about earlier, you asked me who was some of my big influencers in my career, but then also I got to go back and say Augie Garrido is right up there too, because in his challenge was like, how do you connect the mind to what you're doing from a strength training standpoint? He said, because what you do in the weight room is what we're going to do on the baseball field, right? So where if you're not coaching them with your own level of intensity, they're not going to have intensity, right? If you're not consistent, they're not going to be consistent, right? If you're not making sure you've got great effort, they're not going to have great effort, and it's all relatable on the baseball field. So that's across the board. And then the other thing, going back to the baseball, the athlete that plays baseball, if you're thinking from a pitcher standpoint, you go back to what I said about the tennis coach, the legs feed the lungs. Well, the legs feed the arms, just travels up the change so strong legs is a foundation, right? For our pitchers, strong legs is a foundation for our catchers. Strong legs is our foundation for our infielders and outfielders. So that's right from there, across the board to make sure. And then it just comes back to, okay, if we're going to squat, or we're going to back squat, or we're going to front squat, right? There's certain times of the year that we're going to put more emphasis on the back squat. And then we're going to make sure, at what time of year are we going below parallel, or what time of the year are we doing parallel, or what time of the year are we just doing quarter squats, right? For more extension of the hip. So it all comes to that standpoint. So legs, fundamental, right? You got to have a good, strong base to play the game of baseball.
Yeah, that was my next question. Our Hall of Fame coach here, Skip Burtman, was a big believer in recruiting big pitchers and making sure that when they got to Baton Rouge, they developed elite lower body strength. And so I was going to ask you if you felt like lower body strength played a role in a pitcher's velocity. And
yeah, I honestly, it does. And you can see the studies that are out there, because you're creating, you're able to generate more force into the ground. So it, travels up the kinetic change, chain to release point, right? Then you kind of get more into technical stuff about, weighted balls or long toss or this or that. But then it just boils back to the first thing we talked about, consistency, right? You have to consistently be training your legs. Then it comes back to, okay, that you learned from Vern so many years ago when you're working with a baseball athlete, how much strength is enough, right? So if I'm with my baseball player, specifically a pitcher, okay, so I'm able to squat 2 times my body weight. Yep, I'm good. I got some strong legs. Now, instead of just feeding, okay, can I increase that 1 RM max and get it up. How can we manipulate from now? It's more, are we doing our Bulgarian squats? Are we doing our front squats? How are we producing that force application into the ground? That's to me, Gene Coleman, uh, who was the strength coach with the Astros when I was up there with the Reds. He was like, his thought process was like, a baseball player just really needs to be able to squat 1.5 times their body weight. So, I'm like, okay, great. So then once you get that, then I personally want to build up to 2 times, right? And then after that, it's like, okay, it goes back to how much strength is enough. And then it goes back to how are you moving that bar. So yeah, we want to have those strong legs. So it's about the force that we're applying into the ground.
Yeah. So this is, and was always, among the baseball strength coaches that I had here, there was always, we always talked about the difference in the conditioning demands of the different position players, pitchers, and catchers. So how do you see a difference in that? And how would you, or do you feel you should condition, the pitchers, catchers, and position players?
Well, again, if we're, you kind of break it down to end season and off season or fall ball specific to that. I think, I'll put the catchers in, which is the infielders and outfielders, and condition them together, right? And then from the pitching standpoint, if we're in the fall setting prior to fall ball, we'll condition the pitchers different than we will the everyday players, right? And then once you transition into this season, right, and you've got say your Friday night, Saturday, Sunday guy, that's what's great about the college setting is you've got your 7-day week that you start with game day on Friday, and then you just list day 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, that each pitcher knows what's their conditioning plan, what's their strength training plan, yada, yada, yada. Where then from a reliever standpoint, then we'll even divide in, and this is what I say, it's been great having a great relationship with my pitching coach to where we'll say, okay, he's more middle relief, and we might have to extend him out 3 or 4 innings. Or you know what, since he's middle relief, he may not pitch for a whole weekend. All right, what's our conditioning components right there? Where then we got our closer, right? And 3 outs or 6 outs. So we're going to condition him differently from that standpoint too.
Yeah. So what about, all right. So what about your starters? And the reason I'm asking, because my son was a pitcher here at LSU, and he was a bullpen guy, middle relief, and he hated, the long, slow distance running that they had to do. In fact, we were laughing Sunday at the baseball game with Kurt. They were running, so he was supposed to pitch. I think he was hot, where they would say, "Hey, you're going to go to the pen. You'll be the first guy out of the pen, or whatever." And so they were running before the game, and that day they were running foul poles, and the visiting team pitchers were in the they were in the bullpen as our players and Clay were running. And so they were laughing at him and cutting up with him. And then they had stopped for a break. And the visiting team's pitcher says, "Hey, what did you guys do last night?" And they were like, "What are you talking about?" They were like, "Why are you being punished? Why are you being punished?" And they were like, "No, this is what we do." And then Clay says, "I'm actually first guy out of the bullpen tonight." And he said he would go back to the dugout and go starfish on the floor, to recover. And so are you, and Clay was big, Clay was 240 pounds, I guess, and hated running. So are you more of a slower, longer distance guy, or would you be more a sprint oriented, energy system, ATP PC? So what do you think a pitcher needs versus or compared to some other sport or whatever?
Yeah, all that.
I just want to be able to tell Clay I talked to somebody that
Right. No, it depends. That's the great thing. The debate right now is like, okay, with the long, slow distance running, why are you doing it? We'll have our starting pitchers the day after, day one, do a 20-minute
yeah,
job. That's just it. Um, why? A feel good, right? A
yeah,
flush, whatever
hmm
it is, right? From just to start the recovery process.
yeah, hmm
A slow aerobic, right? If we have, either their Nike watch or any other type of, heart rate monitoring stuff, I'll say, okay, here's our heart rate ranges that I want you to stay in so it can truly be an aerobic
right,
zone versus anything else. And then, from our reliever standpoint, it'll be more intervals, more energy specific, right? If you look at how do you want them to be? You want them to be explosive, fast cats. So
yeah,
I'm going to do my best to train them like a sprinter, a 100-meter
right,
sprinter, or something like that. To where our middle reliever guys, maybe a 200 to a 400-meter sprinter, something like that. And then it comes back, will we run before the game for our relievers? Yes. Well, obviously for our starters, the guy that's if it's a Friday game, the Saturday guy's going to do his sprints, Sunday's guy's going to do his intervals and go from there.
right,
But for our relievers, yeah, you take into consideration, you have that mid-level, first guys up, and you say, okay, well, first pitch is say 1 o'clock on a Saturday. Okay, we're at this time. Worst case scenario, he could be in the game at 1:30. Where's our recovery window on that? And then that's how you build off from your back end bullpen guys to your closers and stuff. Kid, they're not going to be in the game until 2.5, 3 hours later from the first
right,
pitch. So they've got plenty of times to recover.
right, right. Good question. Good answer. All right. So now I got a soccer question for you. And I think it goes without saying that conditioning is critical in the sport of soccer, and except for their tactical preparation, it's probably the limiting factor in a lot of teams' success on the pitch. And so, in many instances, I know that the beep test is the gold standard of testing for that particular sport. And what role does the beep test play in the Bobcats' development? And is it something that you think may be adaptable for other sports, whether as a training modality or a test?
Yeah, so here at Texas State, the previous coaching staff, they use the beep test, and with our new coaching staff, they use the beep test, but then they also combine it with the Man U conditioning test. So it's a combination, and the way he's set it up, it's a point system, right? So you have his standards for what's acceptable, the minimum score on the beep test, and you go up from there. And then the same thing on the Man U test. He has his minimum standard, and you go in from there. And then there's so many, points total that you got to require to pass for your conditioning test here. My time at Tennessee, women's tennis used the beep test. Allison Ojeda was the head tennis coach there. She came in and she wanted the beep test and to implement it there. So we used it a little bit with the men's side, not as a conditioning test, and then even down at my time at Texas, when I was just assistant with other sports, women's tennis would use it there. Soccer, obviously, they would use it. So, yeah, and I've even toyed with the idea and used it a little bit from a conditioning standpoint with my women's basketball during their summer conditioning,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Just to get them able, again, because my head coach, she wants to get them up and down the court.
Right.
So I want them to be able to, how fast can we recover? Now, again, I
Yeah.
won't do it that often with
Yeah.
women's basketball, but I will use it.
Yeah.
You think off the top of their head what other sports would be good? Obviously, like I said, we talked about men's and women's tennis, but if you're playing lacrosse, I imagine it would be good for there too.
Yeah. Yeah. In basketball, a lot of the running in basketball, they're cruising, up and down the court, which is, aerobic in nature and very similar to what the beep test does. All right. Last sports specific question. Okay. And a lot of people struggle with this and they can't really tell, but I've probably only played maybe 5 basketball games in my entire life. Okay. I was a wrestler. I'm built more like a basketball player, but so people struggle with it, but I really don't have a lot of experience in basketball except for what I've read. So I want to ask you, is it true that basketball players and basketball coaches really think that lifting weights will negatively affect their shooting touch?
In
Is that
my
true?
instance, that is false. I have not had that a basketball coach say that to
Good.
me, and I haven't had a basketball player say it to me. It's
Yeah.
one, it's I when you're meeting with them from a recruiting standpoint, you're like, listen, I get this. This is such a technical sport that the goal is to put the ball in the basket, and it's not about being a weightlifter,
Yeah.
but it enhances your game. So
Yeah.
we are going to train in the weight room, but I want to keep in the back of my mind, you're coming here to be a basketball player, not to be a weightlifter. So, I'm not going to, look to, what's the word I'm looking for? Add a lot of external mass.
Yeah.
I want to just make so they're strong. So yeah, no, I haven't had that issue with my ladies or my coaching staff.
Yeah. Because I've heard that before. But I don't. Again, I'm not a huge basketball fan, but I've been to some really good basketball games. And a couple of years ago, I went to the LSU Kentucky men's game, and I'm sitting in the bleachers because my youngest son Brady at the time was big into basketball. Man, he played AAU basketball and did all the travel ball stuff and loved it. And so we were there watching Kentucky and LSU play, and it looked like a football game. They were playing, and it was a big game. We were playing well at the time, and of course, they're Kentucky basketball. And I mean, they were banging out there, and it was a physical game. And so when I saw that, I realized the importance of, being physical on the court is critical especially at the elite level. I think it's critical for that. So I've got a couple more questions that I want to ask you, and one is about hamstrings. And this has been a mission of mine since I started the podcast. I like getting people's opinion on healthy hamstrings and what they feel are important, for that, because especially in sports that require you to sprint, if you got a bad hamstring, you're out, man. You're on the sidelines with me. So do you think healthy hamstrings are due to the volume of the sprinting that you do, the type of conditioning that you do, or things that you may do in the weight room? Or is it the sum of all of the training? That's the magic pill. What do you think?
It's the sum, and then as you were asking the question, it's the other thing that goes back and the why I smile is, as I've taken it and I can throw it out, whether it's basketball, soccer, or baseball here. One of Coach Stuckey's old sayings is like, a stretched hammy is
Yeah.
a happy hammy,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
they, And I'm like, yeah, let's just keep him Coach Stuckey alive.
Yeah.
Because I remember him saying that up there when we were having stretch with football.
Well,
So
we used to stretch those cats out, man.
yeah, didn't we know?
The-
But it's a sum of all.
yeah.
You're going to have to run, and you're going to have to run fast to have healthy hammies. All through sports of mine do that. When we were doing our speed school with baseball, um, we want to work on proper ground contact and hip extension and recovery because all that goes into play. And we want to do it as fast, as close to top end speed as possible. And then also that we want to work on too is we want to work on our deceleration pattern, right? To make sure because um, all three of those sports are about accelerating and then decelerating and then accelerating again. So we want to make sure we want to focus on that, and that's part of the sum of the training too. So yeah, to answer your question, it's definitely the sum of what we're doing from a strength standpoint, what we're doing from a conditioning standpoint, that all ties in together.
Great. Now, last question, and this is especially true not just for strength and conditioning coaches, but for high school coaches, I think that may coach more than one sport and then have a class load in addition to, their sport teams. How do you balance your work, life demands of being a collegiate strength coach? How do you balance it all?
Well, what I'm going to say is I picked up from Michael Gervais, who he works with Pete Carroll out there with Seattle Seahawks, and he has a podcast, Finding Mastery. He's from the sports psychology aspect, and his standpoint is there is no balance, right? You are where you are when you're there. So if you're at work, you're at work. Now, if the wife or if the kids or something like that call, right, then at some point you'll be able to pick that up. And if it's an issue that you'll have to address, right, the one thing I have learned, and I might have had to have learned it the hard way, right, is as spouses, we have two jobs, right? We have our job for that we make from a financial standpoint, and then our other job is to be a husband. Uh, we will be provided coworkers to help with our job from that standpoint at work, but we don't have a coworker with our spouse. So that's when, if there is a competing factor, that's when I said there is no balance, right? Wife comes first. I don't have children, I'm sure, but you'd be like, children will be first before this job, right? Because we don't have help there. We have help at work, right? If my wife has a doctor's appointment that she wants me to be there, I'm going to make sure I've got somebody here to cover for me, right? Because it's important to her.
Good deal. That's huge too. Well, unfortunately, our time is up. Okay. So thanks for joining us today. And I really appreciate your time. It's been great talking to you. And not only talking about your career, but how you train the teams there at Texas State. You can follow Coach Sewell on Instagram at Coach LGS1389. Again, at Coach LGS at 1389. This brings us to the end of today's podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're someone interested in doing a podcast with us, or if there's someone that you would like to recommend to us as a guest, please email us at podcast@themoffittmethod.fit. I hope you enjoyed this podcast as much as I did. And if so, please subscribe and leave us a review. For more information about the Moffitt Method program and everything that we have to offer, please visit us on Instagram at The Moffitt Method and on Twitter at Moffitt Method. Those two are different. Not sure why, but they are. And then you can always go to our website with links to all of our social media accounts and information regarding the Moffitt Method. And that is themoffittmethod.fit, themoffittmethod.fit. Thank you for joining us and have a great day.